0. It's July the 3rd, 2019. This is 508, a show about Worcester. I'm Mike Benedetti. This is Brendan Melican. Today we're celebrating the legacy of American independence.
Nice hat, Mike.
Thanks, Brendan. What do you think
If I'd known that was the subject of today's show, I probably would have worn something more appropriate, like my American flag tank top.
How are you doing?
I'm great, man. I'm a little tired, but I'm pretty damn good.
This is a week we don't have a guest because man, there's just a gigantic amount of Worcester news that has built up. We need to clear out of our system. This week we could talk about. I think we're going to talk about the most famous sentence written in Worcester, Worcester Magazine, recycling, maybe diversity at neighborhood watches, police complaints, brownfields, behavioral health, clean water, cats and active voters, fireworks, the school dress code.
That all sounds fascinating, but why don't we start at the beginning? Because you just you threw something out there that I think is a bit of a conundrum.
Yes.
There's a backlog of Worcester news that you said we have to go over.
Yes.
But in the time that we haven't been really talking about Worcester news, as I think were insinuating, Worcester Magazine also kind of became like a one-person show. Maybe now two people, I guess, and a bunch of freelancers.
Well, this is, I think, is the news this week. We talked about the news a couple weeks ago whenever Bill Shaner became a one-man shop over at Worcester Magazine, and now it's potentially a two-man shop with Victor Infante being the editor and Bill being the reporter at large.
I feel like I've seen more news from Florida on the Telegram and Gazette website over the last week than I have from Worcester, other than the local columnists. I guess my conundrum is, where do we get a backlog in news if there's nobody gathering news anymore?
People are doing it. Nick Casopoulos is doing it.
Just Nick and Clive. That's it.
All kinds of people are doing it. Hey, yeah. What do you think is the most famous sentence written in Worcester? As of 2 weeks ago, I would not have even guessed and dared an opinion on this. I'm curious to know if you have any idea. It's kind of an unfair question.
Yeah, that's totally unfair. Yeah, go ahead.
I think it's the last sentence of Casey at the Bat.
Oh, really?
Somewhere in this favored land, the sun is shining bright. The band is playing somewhere, and somewhere hearts are light. And some more men are laughing, and some more children shout. But there is no joy in Mudville. Mighty Casey has struck out. I think I had read this in the past that this was written in Worcester, and I didn't really understand the context. And now that I do, I care about it more.
Okay.
And it actually feels to me like one of these Worcester history things that's actually true.
Yeah.
Like people will tell you shredded wheat wasn't invented in Worcester. Not true.
Yeah.
No way. 100% wrong.
Birth control, that was Shrewsbury.
100% not made in Worcester. But
rocketry, Auburn.
Smiley face, maybe with an asterisk. Yeah. Rickshaw, seriously, are you kidding me? But Casey at the Bat, 100% written in Worcester. Worcester boy and Harvard grad Ernest Thayer went out west with his college buddy William Randolph Hearst. Hearst was going to run his dad's newspaper, the San Francisco Examiner. Thayer was going to be the humor columnist. He'd done some humor columnist stuff when he was at Harvard. After a couple of years, he got sick, and in 1888, he went home to 67 Chatham Street in Worcester. And he wrote his last humor column for the Examiner while he was convalescing, Casey at the Bat. He went on to live a life of being a somewhat resentful mill manager and an aesthete traveler of the nation and the world. Never really had a lot of good things to say about Casey at the Bat. Not super proud of it, but he wrote it right there.
There it was.
Right here in downtown Worcester, basically.
Yeah, you're probably right, too. That probably is something that more people would recognize than any,
Yeah.
I concede.
There you go. Worcester, Massachusetts. Good job, guys. Here's something from Worcester Magazine. This is by Bill Shaner. He mentions that there was a meeting of the Committee on Public Works, the City Council's Committee on Public Works, and in a 2-1 vote, the city's overall trash and recycling overhaul moved forward, plastic bags intact. George Russell, Bill Shaner mentions, chairman of the committee and among the most vocal opponents of the switch to plastic bags, voted against Candy Miro Carlson and Matt Wally. So now the switch to plastic bags heads to a full council meeting for a vote on July the 23rd. Now, Russell had said he would like to see an education campaign around recycling, which I feel like there's a place for education campaigns. I don't think it's here, Brendan Melican.
Yeah.
I think if people didn't know that there was recycling, like we were just starting municipal recycling, you would want to have an education campaign.
If it was 1978, if Carter was president, you'd probably want a good recycling education campaign.
Like if the problem is that like all of the trash blows out of these open bins across the street, and you should do something like, I don't know what, put a barbell on top of your bin or put a lid on your bin or something.
Yeah.
That seems like not the kind of thing you need to tell people. That if people are not doing that, it's for some other reasons besides education or awareness.
Right.
Their awareness doesn't need to be raised. But
I just get a kick out of the. I know it's apples and pomegranates, but I think it was New York became the second city to Is it the city or now the state banning plastic shopping bags?
Oh, I don't know.
I think it was New York. I can't remember city or state. Doesn't really matter because whatever. But the point is, I think it's really neat when you see dueling headlines, even though they're not entirely related, where you've got major cities banning plastic bags, and then in Worcester, we're making moves to more plastic bags.
Well, I mean, this just brings me to Bill's next sentence here, where he says, so the idea here is that rather than putting your recycling in an open-topped bin,
right,
you would be putting it in a special recycling bag. It would be a clear bag.
Right.
Bill says, anecdotally, I've not heard a single good thing about this proposed move from anyone outside of City Hall and its immediate social circles.
Right.
This is because I guess Bill's never listened to this show. Because I feel like this is just like an obviously good... I was thinking about it today, man. It's like there was probably a time when you'll put out your trash and it would be in an open-top bin of trash.
Right.
And at some point somebody was like, this is a bad idea. Animals are getting in there. The stuff is blowing around. Let's put a lid on that. Or let's put stuff in a bag and then put it in that trash can. And like these are like reasonable steps forward. And somehow recycling, we're still in this like older mentality though. It's more old-fashioned.
I guess so, yeah. And we've talked about the whole recycling thing as a whole. I still don't get why we're not moving to larger bins. Like the problem was never that like bins. It was the size and style of the bin in conjunction with the amount of refuse that we actually produce as humans, right? Like when we rolled out that, if you look at the time frame since we rolled out that original program with those little bins to now, like our consumerist habits have changed for the worst in that time frame. So we're actually producing more garbage. It's like bigger containers is the answer. The bag thing doesn't make any sense to me at all.
I feel like a bag is a bigger container.
A bag is a bigger container, yeah.
I mean,
I wish you luck what day is your trash pickup day?
Our trash pickup day is Wednesday morning.
So late Wednesday morning, I look forward to you picking up all the trash that wasn't picked up because someone ripped open the bag for cans or whatever, or something that they were going to get to, and then the problem recreated itself, right? Like
people are not going to mess with my bags.
Well,
there's going to be a pile of people at the end of the street.
And I actually love that in my neighborhood. I love the can people in my neighborhood.
Yeah.
That like come. Oh, I just kicked the camera. The people that come through and take all the actual recyclables out of that I'm too lazy to do anything with. But yeah, it's a problem that its solution is maybe in a way George is right. Like the education side, not an education thing about this is how you recycle. Well, this is just how you not be like a slob, right? Like you mentioned animals. Well, like if we're not putting our garbage out the night before, like the city asks, like animals aren't. You don't have like roving bands of angry raccoons at 8 o'clock in the morning, right? It's like that's something that when someone doesn't want to get up early to put the trash out or doesn't want to think about it in the morning, they do it the night before. That's when your coyotes and foxes and raccoons come out and have a field. Even your rambunctious squirrels, they're gonna have a field day because they're out at night. Like you said earlier with like stuff blowing around. If you can't figure out how to put some sort of makeshift lid on a bin on a windy day, it's like, you're right. Like, we really can't help you, but at some point in time, we need to figure that out, right? Because you are a part of the...
You know what's basically...
You're probably also someone that rolls through stop signs, and almost hits Mike Benedetti 6 or 7 times a day.
You know what it's also a bin with a lid?
What's that?
A bag.
A bag is a bin.
A bag is just a bin with a lid.
I know, and they rip and they're weird, and I don't know.
Anyway, Bill Shaner, not a fan of this show. In Shrewsbury, I don't know if you saw this in the Community Advocate.
Nope.
Shrewsbury's new trash and recycling program.
What are they doing?
Really not that much different. I mean, they're sort of switching. They're switching.
Burn garbage in their yards?
No.
Maybe that's what we should do. Bring out burn permits.
Paper and cardboard will go into one bin, and glass, plastic, and cans in another. One notable change is that pizza boxes can now be recycled, as well as paper towel and toilet tissue rolls. Basically, they're getting a contract with Waste Management instead of...
We should have a full panel show to discuss what is a bin like.
I mean,
So hot dog a sandwich?
A bin is just... I'm trying to think of a good ad slogan around bins, You were in a rap video this week. How did that go?
A brief half-second appearance, in the deep background.
Yeah.
Of a hip-hop video,
I feel like this is amazing. I feel like we should talk about this a little bit.
We should talk about this a little bit.
So this is a week where Joyner Lucas made another video in the city of Worcester.
Mm-hmm.
The last video, of course, is the infamous video he made at St. Peter's. And this video is a video where, correct me if I'm wrong, he went down to the Y, downtown Y, and he put out the word to people who are homeless or otherwise part of the street scene, like, hey, come on down, get your hair cut, get hooked up some other ways, clothes or something maybe, be in my video, looking cool. And then a bunch of people like walked around behind him while he rapped about something.
Well, there are two separate filming days. Yeah, they were unrelated, sort of sets. The second one was Lakeside, where I believe he grew up. Lakeside Apartments over by Worcester Square. Yeah, that's a friend of mine who was actually one of Joyner's teachers at South. He came up from the Cape, and my son and myself and he met down there. It was a great day.
Yeah,
really fun.
Yeah,
people were really, really excited about it. That was the cool thing to see. It was like people like I don't know, getting their fan on in Worcester and being excited about the city. That was kind of cool.
I was really pretty amazed. Like, as somebody who spends a few hours a week doing soup kitchen stuff in the city of Worcester, I have a casual relationships with a lot of people who are either homeless or
sure
part of the scene. And a lot of them were in that video. Yeah. Just being like.
So what's your take on that?
I thought it was awesome. Like the first person. I mean, the first person in that video is this lady Blanca, who talks about, I think, very briefly about her life at the beginning and at the end. This is a lady who I know just from talking to her a bunch of hours. If you were to ask me beforehand, like, should I interview for this video, she would be the person. I would be like, she's had a hard life. She's very charismatic, a very eloquent person. And she's had as hard a life as anybody I've ever met, and so great combination for your video. Hard combination if you're living that life, but a great combination for your video. And sure enough, that's who they talked to at the beginning and the end of the video.
And she was fantastic. Like, I don't know. I'm hoping that it was genuine. I don't know her like
that was
you
genuine.
do. I mean,
that's what she would tell you if you went up to her on the street honestly and you talked to her for more than 5 minutes. She would be willing to say the same thing.
And that was pretty rad. And she looked both fantastic and looked really happy that someone put time into making her look fantastic.
She did. I haven't seen her since then, and I hope it's for good reasons. I hope she's been doing good stuff.
Yeah.
There's a.
Do you think more people know Casey at the Bat or have heard Casey at the Bat and committed to memory than Joyner Lucas lyrics?
Yeah.
You think so?
I think so.
That are alive right now?
I think so. You know why I think so? I just think so because we're living in an age in which the number one band in America, most Americans won't even have heard of. Right? Like, we're living in an age where, you get a gold record by selling, 10 records or something.
But maybe that's just because we're old, and, we both heard it when we were kids. Do they have...
Well, this is what I'm saying.
Is there time in the MCAS
this is what I'm
to teach
This is what I'm saying. Kids? This is what I'm saying, is that, the number of people who know, Joyner Lucas lyrics have memorized, probably not even 1 million, a couple 100,000. And I feel like, people over 60 who've memorized Casey at the Bat has got to be a couple 100,000, plus people under 60 who are memorizing it as part of a new generation.
So what you're saying, it's not until the boomers die off that Joyner Lucas stands a chance in having the most famous quotes from Worcester.
Casey at the Bat happened back when there was a monoculture, man, and the story with this was that it's a fine poem. It's nothing to write. I guess it's something to write home about, but it's nothing super earth shattering. But there was a Broadway performer. I think he was the father of the guy who played Paul Drake on Perry Mason. Could have been his grandfather. I think it's his father.
It's a weird bit of knowledge toss out on our viewers.
He was a vaudeville performer, and he was going to do a show, and they were having as a special guests the New York Giants and the Chicago White Sox or something. Two pro baseball teams at the time, and one of them was up in the box seats on one side of the theater. One of them was up in the box seats on the other side of the theater. And before the performance, he was thinking, I got to get some baseball material for this special performance. And somebody who was around there had come through San Francisco recently, clipped this poem out of the paper, and was like, this is baseball related. Yeah. Why don't you try this? And he was like, great, I'll do it. And of course, it was a big hit with the baseball players. Sure. The press wrote about this glowingly. So he tried it the next night. And 10,000 performances later, it was literally, I think he did 10,000 public performances of this, he estimated. Huh. It was a nationwide, beloved poem.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, but like we're not, I feel like we're not in a culture where there's going to be like America's baseball poem or like the rap song of the week or whatever. Or even if, again, like, yeah, we're just not in a monoculture anymore. No, it isn't to say that these songs, that this culture being created is bad or any better or any worse than Casey at the Bat.
Right.
Right. It's just that we're no longer in a country where when you hit, you win.
Yeah.
There's one first prize for the thing that people care about this week. And if you get it, you get it, and everybody cares about that one thing that week.
Sure.
Not that way.
Yeah.
Not that way. Not that way anymore.
Casey that would have been way more interesting if it involved rappers in Kelly Square and Lambos on Chandler Street.
Yeah, well, it's got some themes like that. Is behavioral health care in Massachusetts broken? Susan Spencer reports in the Telegram and Gazette about a listening session the Massachusetts Health and Human Service Office held in Worcester. People raised concerns about what insurance companies are willing to pay for qualified clinicians, lack of services for the deaf, and the limits on involuntary treatment. I feel like the limits on involuntary treatment that's another thing that always comes up a lot in my own day-to-day talking about the world. Like, I think we've done a really good thing in moving away from a world where you can just accidentally be sentenced to life in mental illness prison.
Yeah.
But it feels like that balance is still a tricky balance to achieve, and that there's still plenty of people out there in the world that friends and families say, why isn't this person locked up?
Yeah.
And the authorities say, because we can't just do that.
Right.
Just because this person is acting like a weirdo, they haven't crossed the line.
Yeah. I mean, so my experience in that universe is relatively limited and only in a professional capacity from when I worked as an EMT. But the process of sectioning somebody, I mean, is pretty well defined, and it's one of those things that
harm to yourself or others.
Yeah, and one of those things that for all the things that people claim, regarding law enforcement abuse of powers and whatnot, that's one of those powers that's in the hand of law enforcement that's probably the lowest of hanging fruit in terms of potential abuse, and I can't think of any time you ever saw anything coming close to abuse of that. It's something that's taken so seriously, like removing somebody's individual liberty and sense of agency when it comes to healthcare decisions.
Something related to this, Brendan, we've talked about how we might be the last generational cohort to not only maybe care about Casey the Bat, but to have been dangerously into drugs and alcohol as youths. But here's a 2017 paper showing more drinking, more dangerous drinking, more alcohol use disorder, and more hospitalizations for alcohol poisoning in 2013 versus 2003.
So there's hope, is what you're saying, Mike.
Well, yeah, like, for example, let's talk about 12-month high-risk drinking. The prevalence of 12-month high-risk drinking increased significantly between 2001 to 2002 and 2012 to 2013, from 9.7% to 12.6%, a 30% increase in the total population. And there are different groups that had a higher or a lower amount of that, but not like generationally.
I'm just catching this one line here that you didn't highlight, but says, significant increases in high-risk drinking were also seen for all socioeconomic demographic subgroups except Native Americans and respondents residing in rural areas.
Yes.
I feel like that's an interesting footnote there, because those are two areas that classically or historically
we would think of those
have had and have had issues. I mean, those are two groups that I think are oftentimes viewed as unfortunately viewed as like canary in the coal mine sort of subgroups, that when some form of addiction is going to tear through society as a whole at some point in time, they tend to start in those areas, mostly for economic reasons. And now everyone else is playing catch up.
Yeah, I don't know, man. It could be also that people are switching over to other drugs in those areas. This is just about alcohol use. Yeah. Did we talk on this show about the reason why rural America is always under such economic distress?
I think we've talked about it a lot, but not in any one particular time.
I've just mentioned this. This is one of these wonderful things that I read. The Washington Post. Stop me if I said this on this show. The Washington Post had this a couple months ago, and the article was like, "Why is rural America having such a hard time economically?" And they said, "Well, the reason is that because if your area is doing well economically, people will move there. That the line between urban and rural is way closer to rural than people think. Like 2/3 of the people in this country who would say they live in a rural area, demographically, geographically, do not live in a rural area. They just think they do.
This is kind of like around here when we have talked a lot about census tracts and whatnot. When you look at the, what are we again, the East Bridgeport, Connecticut, census tract, it's the weird one that runs from Worcester down to Connecticut. that's not viewed, even though there's lots of towns and communities and neighborhoods in that tract that people would say, I live in a rural area. And if you went from Worcester and found yourself in one of those communities, you probably would get
You
lost.
would say,
and there'd be
this
no
is a
cell phone
rural
service
area.
and wish you had a map. You're not. You live in an urban area,
yes.
according to the federal government.
Yes,
Yeah.
the man does not believe you live in a rural area. Anyway, so this is the reason that rural America is in economic decline, and is essentially, it's baked into the way that we measure things that they're in economic decline, because unless you figure out a way for your people to make more money and prevent anybody from moving there,
Yeah.
you'll never be a wealthy rural area.
Mhm.
It's just impossible.
Yeah.
You know, and when your economy gets bad and people move away, at some point you drop below the rural-urban line, and suddenly you're a poor rural area. It's hard to stay a poor. I guess it's probably hard to stay a poor urban area if people have the ability to move out of your place easily.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so I just wonder about that as far as alcohol goes. You know, Brendan, there was a report, data from the city's Human Rights Commission. This is what Nick Katsopoulos was reporting on the Telegram a couple weeks ago, talking about diversity at Worcester Neighborhood Watch meetings.
Mm-hmm.
That guess who is overrepresented at Worcester Neighborhood Watch meetings relative to the city's population as a whole.
Okay, let me think about this for a second. I'm going to guess it's probably middle-aged white women who are more likely than others to call the police because they see people of color having a barbecue. Did you not get that specific, or just white people in general?
It says older white people.
Older white people. Well, it's close.
Yeah.
Maybe I added a little bit
Yeah.
there.
I mean, you know, so yeah. So the median age in Worcester is 34, but 67% of the people at neighborhood watch meetings are over 55.
Yeah.
60% of them are women, while our population is roughly 50-50. And racially, again, 84% of them are white, and the city is not 84% white overall.
Yeah.
Well, you know, the funny thing is, the last neighborhood watch meeting I was at, usually there's only a couple of neighborhood residents at these meetings. Like, literally, frequently there's two, including me. And so, and both of us being, like, again, like, older than 45 white people. But the last one, there was like a ton of my Latino neighbors showed up for this, so it was like 95% Latino.
Yeah.
This last meeting.
Huh.
Yeah, it was.
So I don't go to mine
wild.
because the minutes are fantastic. So I just subscribe to the minutes after the fact.
Yeah.
But you know, I'll tell you something. There's one thing that I do see about the minutes from my neighborhood watch, and parallel to the social networking site Nextdoor.com. The things that people discuss, so like there's the objectively bad things, right? Like when your neighborhood watch police officer is going to go over like the reported break-ins or, you know, whatever, assaults or anything that's a cataloged crime. That bucket is over here, and that's the stuff I read for. It's interesting just to see if there's trends or what have you. But then there's the stuff that people just want to complain about. And I feel like this is what Nextdoor.com is great at. It'll be
never look at that. I'm scared to look at that.
It's crazy. I mean, it's like... Yeah, it's people that are like in fear of their lives because somebody sat parked in a car for like 5 minutes, and it's like, do you ever think that maybe like somebody has a life that doesn't actually involve thinking about like you peering out your window at all hours of the day, wondering what's going on outside? It's this really paranoid sort of view of everything. But then there's also just the not fun crowd, right? Like this is my favorite week on Nextdoor.com because this is when everyone starts complaining about fireworks.
Oh yeah.
And yeah. In some, I empathize in some capacity to if there's issues of like dealing with like a combat veteran who's got PTSD. I mean but it's the 4th of July, and like we know if there's one thing that's going to happen this year, people are going to blow stuff up. And in Massachusetts, probably less frequently than most states because we're only like one of 2 that bans fireworks anymore. And it's just the constant sort of complaining about everything that doesn't involve quiet, calm, and still. It's like, how do you live in the second largest city in New England and expect to be a rural area? Like maybe those are the folks that are upset that the census tracts don't line up with their worldview. But I feel like that's where your crime watch meetings and Nextdoor.com is like where 90% of your complaining about kids doing wheelies on bicycles, fireworks, and people sitting in cars that are probably not doing anything wrong originate from.
Yeah.
As far as dangers of fireworks.
Yeah, I mean, like
I
just feel like as far as the larger issue of I mean, obviously the solution to diversity at neighborhood watch meetings in Worcester is universal basic income.
Yes.
But as far as like, is this an issue? I mean, I don't even feel like this is an issue. I don't want to say this is an issue I shouldn't care about. I'm going to say this is an issue I shouldn't care about. It's an important issue, but I have no idea how to even begin tackling that issue in isolation from larger issues.
Yeah.
So I feel like you just assume, you say that's a canary in a coal mine for 15 other things, and you work on those 15 other things.
Maybe, but there's probably a simple argument to be made that like a lot of those groups are started, and they're started by a group of concerned residents who over time become the representatives of a larger group, unintended representatives of a larger group.
Yeah.
It feels like it should be one of those things that like a simple requirement, if you're going to hold a neighborhood watch meeting, X percentage of households like within that neighborhood watch area need to be notified of the meeting. Like they're quasi-public meetings.
Yeah.
And I know that advertisement exists probably on the City of Worcester's website and whatnot, but not in a way that I think most people would know to even look. And I don't think most people even realize those things take place.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you this, like talking to people about these meetings, like people in my neighborhood have lived there long. I'm talking about non-white people who I've talked to about this in my neighborhood who've lived there longer than me. Mm-hmm. They know these meetings are going on. They're not necessary. It's not clear to them that this meeting is a useful thing for them to go to.
Yeah.
So like to a certain extent, it may just be like, except for the weeks when there's actually something real going on, like this past time, it may just be weird nerds.
Totally.
And maybe weird nerds are, maybe we just have disproportionately older, whiter, weird nerd population in this country, in this city. I think
the only problem, though, outside of the person yelling in the hallway behind us, is so that you have a captive audience with a police officer who's a representative of the Worcester Police Department to that neighborhood watch group. And you oftentimes have city councilors at those neighborhood watch groups, if not state representatives, who will pop in them from time to time. And I think it is possible in certain areas of the city for the proverbial squeaky wheel to get the grease, right? But that squeaky wheel might not actually be dealing with any form of reality that we should actually be concerned about. And the potential for having either limited resources. I think there's a fist fight going on the hallway right now. Like, do we need to go break that up? I don't know that it's the best way to be allocating resources on a neighborhood level. Again, if you have a city councilor sitting there who wants to make sure they're looking good for the constituents, and the police who are making sure they're being responsive to the folks who are asking for help. But they might not be the best things to be asking help for.
Well, I tell you, there's plenty of weeks where it feels like the neighborhood residents are outnumbered by the people from City Hall. But and then there's the weeks when the people from City Hall are outnumbered by the neighborhood residents.
Right.
And those are the weeks when I'm like, I'm glad that we do this, because maybe every month there's not actually a high priority thing to be talking about, like a new thing to be talking about.
Sure.
But like every couple months there probably is, and it's good to have that available when every couple months you do need to get 20, 30 people to come down to the meeting to say, hey, this nuclear waste dump is not working out. We need to move it out of our neighborhood.
We need to put it in a bin.
Brendan, speaking of blowing off your hand, fire officials warn danger of illegal fireworks by Anissa Gardizzi. Sorry.
Do we have no information about the danger of the fireworks?
Well, I grew up in the real America. So, I grew up in places where fireworks were super legal and used fireworks all the day long.
I grew up at a time where if you told your parents you're going outside to have a bottle rocket fight, they wouldn't think twice and say, okay, just be home for dinner.
There you go. So, right. So I was getting ready to read this to be like, well, this is why I say like Massachusetts is wise and has banned these dangerous items. And as an adult who's less excited about fireworks, I'm looking forward to something that's going to validate my lack of interest in fireworks as I get older. But then I come across the paragraph, although the possession and use of fireworks is illegal in Massachusetts, fires, amputations, and burn injuries from fireworks were reported last summer. 800 such incidents have been reported over the last decade. So if only 80 people a year in the entire state of Massachusetts are being injured by fireworks, that's like, I feel like I should be shooting off some fireworks, man. These are like super safe.
As an adult who still really enjoys blowing stuff up, like probably almost in an unhealthy way, not unhealthy to the point where someone from the fire department should be like keeping an eye on me because I'm lighting dumpsters on fire. I just really enjoy this time of year and explosions. This stuff just drives me insane. Yeah, I mean, of course people hurt themselves doing things. I'm sure there's a bunch of kids that got concussed from playing Little League Baseball this year.
I was about to say, there's got to be more than 80 people getting injured by Hot Wheels cars. And another 80 being injured by Matchbox cars. In the
I would have to bet that there are definitely more than 80 concussions that could potentially lead to CTE long-term from football players, right? Like, But we don't have a ban on football.
Not yet.
No,
We're working on that.
I don't know. Yeah, I like this time. Sorry, neighbors on nextdoor.com, but I enjoy blowing things up, and I plan on blowing things up this to celebrate Independence Day. So sorry about that in advance.
You know, the last time I peeked out my window, being a weird person, was last night when I was working on something in my home office, and suddenly I hear this bizarre rumbling sound. And I'm like, I don't even know what this is. So I like stick my head out, looking at the window, and there's nothing there. And I stick my head outside, and there's nothing there. And I come back in my office, and it's gone. I think somebody had been setting off some kind of fireworks cavalcade for a minute somewhere in the neighborhood. And
Could have been a helicopter.
Echoing around. It could have been a helicopter. It could have been, you know, some sort of bulldozer.
Yeah, even if it was something like construction equipment, I think you should still set up a nextdoor.com account to complain about the fireworks in your neighborhood.
Brendan, speaking of commodities, Brent crude oil is $63 a barrel, down 6% on the week and down 20% on the year. Bitcoin is $11,400, down 15% a week and up 72% on the year. So Bitcoin's still doing good, but the last week, for whatever reason, the bloom is off that rose a little bit.
Just a little bit. It's a holiday, though.
Yeah, and Bitcoin, man, who even knows? I don't want to talk about brownfield cleanups. Complaints, we could talk more about the cops. Complaints against the Worcester police declined by 38%, the lowest level of the past 7 years.
Wow.
There were 44, this is from Nick Katsopoulos in the Telegram and Gazette, speaking of people who write about non-Florida things in the Telegram.
Doing a great job, Nick.
44 complaints filed against the police in 2018 compared to 71 in 2017. That's a big difference. It's a 38% decrease. And the average number of complaints over the last 7 years has been 72. So that was a big decrease last year. It says, of the 44, 38 were generated by citizens, 6 were generated within the police department by the chief, a deputy chief, or a commander. That there were 44. Those 44 complaints came out of 145,000 incidents that the police reported to last year.
Wow.
The number of incidents was at a 7-year high and up 4% over the previous year. So there were complaints in 0.03% of police incidents.
I feel like whenever we've talked about this issue in the past, we've usually had a guest on who has been critical of the way in which a complaint would be filed.
Yes.
I feel as though that for a long time, that was the main issue, was that they felt the process by which someone would file a complaint may be flawed.
Okay.
In a sense, from Nick's reporting, that's something that's changed as well, too?
I mean, I don't see anything in here that talks about, like...
Do we need to get Kevin Kazan back on the show?
I mean, this is the question, right? Is whenever this kind of... I mean, that's a gigantic drop.
Yeah.
From, an average that was about the average. A 40% drop makes me feel like... Did they change the form that people fill out? Did the officer who's in charge of taking these complaints change to somebody who, loses most of them?
Or have they actively been working to improve upon relations at the same time?
That's right.
That's why I'm curious if Nick included... I didn't read this column. I didn't know if Nick included anything that might balance out the...
It says 7.6% of the allegations were sustained. Police were exonerated in 52% of the allegations. And then those were situations... The exoneration situations were situations where the acts did occur, but the actions were considered to be legit after internal police investigations. So some of them... some of them in that other, whatever it is, 40%, are ones where, like, either nobody did any, like, when they went back to talk to the witnesses of, like, hey, you just filed a police report, what's your deal? They were like, I don't want to talk to you. Or else they looked into it and they were like, nothing like that happened.
All right.
So, again, this is internal police numbers. And, I know that the police have really worked hard to try to reduce the number of arrests in recent years. They're doing a lot of, with their community task forces and whatever. So anyway, probably good job, Worcester Police Department. Who knows? I'm not going to read about the bow mall effect, man.
Did you watch? I don't think we talked at all about, but did you watch the video at all from that couple that was up here from Texas? That was it was kind of like one of the cop watch kind of groups that was recording in the Worcester Police Department lobby. And then they got arrested.
I heard of. I think I talked to someone who referenced this, but I didn't know what the context was.
You got to track down the video and watch it. It is these two. It's a husband and wife team.
Yeah.
They were bouncing around. They're from Texas, but they were bouncing around a couple cities and towns in Massachusetts recording. It was the most bizarre form of just like I don't know, trying to pick a fight with police that I've ever seen in my life. And it was like 2 hours of video in their lobby where they were just harassing Worcester police officers through the glass there. And it was great because the police were giving them zero response. Like, it was basically just ignoring that there were two legitimately crazy people here just egging us on trying to pick a fight.
Yeah.
Until somebody came into the police department actually trying to file a police report. It seemed like it was a woman who had just experienced some sort of violent act against her. And then this couple that claimed to be like a cop watch group were like recording the process of the police engaging with her, which was, I mean, seemed like a total violation of this young woman's rights beyond the fact that they were still harassing the police and yelling stuff at them. And they ended up both getting arrested. And I thought that was nice. They just seemed like awful human beings. But I don't know. It was probably because of the video, they live streamed it, so people were able to grab the full video before they took it down from their own YouTube accounts.
Yeah.
It's the sort of thing that I bet if you saw a creative editing of like a 15-second clip of such encounter, you probably could make it creatively look like the Worcester Police Department were a bunch of jerks. When you watch like the entire hour of video, it's like, wow, these people are awful. And like, kudos to the Worcester Police Department to be able to stick cotton balls in their ears for an hour while two people just stand in their building and harass them. But yeah,
I feel like we're doing a bad job being Worcester's libertarian voice. We're saying too many nice things about the cops. We'll start saying mean things about the cops.
Okay, well, a couple weeks. Wait till after the holiday.
Here's a paper where this is a paper, or it's really an essay from the most recent issue of the journal Conservation Biology. The principal author of the essay is William Lynn, who's a Clark professor, and the paper is called A Moral Panic Over Cats.
Long overdue.
Some conservationists believe that free-ranging cats pose an enormous risk to biodiversity and public health, and therefore should be eliminated from the landscape by any means necessary.
I'm okay with this.
As much as we share a commitment to conservation of biodiversity and wild nature, we believe these ideas are wrong and feel an unwarranted moral panic over cats.
Oh.
There are good conservation and public health reasons and evidence to be skeptical that free-ranging cats constitute a disaster for biodiversity and human health in all circumstances.
This is somebody who already has been infected by toxoplasmosis from their house cats, and the cats are just controlling their brain and making them think that they're friends when they're not.
Well, you know, Susan Spencer on the Telegram and Gazette talks to William Lynn, and Mr. Lynn says, cats get essentially profiled as an enemy of the people, Mr. Lynn said in an interview. And I feel like that's an accurate characterization of the situation, but that as an enemy of the people. But I think Mr. Lynn
that's an
appeal. They're being unfairly profiled as an enemy of the people.
We can both agree that they are, in fact, an enemy of the people.
Yeah,
I mean, they're small lions. They're apex predators that don't realize how tiny they are.
Well, anyway, he's basically saying that, like, it's not, you know, the idea that, like, whatever, the bird population is all dying because people's cats are killing them all, or wild cats are killing them all, is not well substantiated by the evidence, and that we don't have to just like exterminate all feral cats as they have in some jurisdictions. That maybe cats aren't that big of a deal. Again, I'm not sure if I believe this.
I think even the ones that are indoors are questionable.
The Worcester Human Rights Commission supports a state bill that would no longer require municipalities to designate registered voters as inactive if they fail to respond to the annual street listing. Nick Hatsopoulos reports in the Telegram and Gazette. Hallelujah. Yeah, like the inactive voter list, man. What is there to say about the inactive voter list? It feels like the MCAS. It's like my personal MCAS.
Yeah.
I don't have anything good to say about it. Like, I like the idea of making sure that people, you know, live in their jurisdiction where they're voting. But like, man, like I'm on this inactive voter list all the time. I fill out any paper the city sends me. I'll send them 15 copies of it if they want to. I don't care. I love mailing papers back to the city. I vote in every election. I vote in every preliminary election. I vote all as much as I can possibly vote. And yet I still end up on the inactive voter list half the time. And, you know, what happens if you're on the inactive voter list? You cast a ballot, but there's like a little note put down there, like maybe this guy is, maybe there's an issue with this guy or something. But that's about it. You still get to vote. Your vote still basically gets to get counted, unless concerns got raised down the line. But it's still a pain in the neck. I'm not totally sure why. I mean, so this is I'll tell you why they're being filed, because that Ewok Lever Representative David LaBeouf has filed this bill. That he would give voters 2 years to respond to the street listing, so that if you don't respond for 2 consecutive years, then you would be an inactive voter. which feels like, I don't know why we're doing any of this still.
It seems like an arbitrary sort of, why not 6 years? Wouldn't it just be easier just to have everybody registered to vote? Actually, no. Of course, it wouldn't be easier because that would take legislation, and of course, we're not capable of actually doing meaningful things like legislation and elected bodies anymore. But hypothetically, it seems like it'd be easier, and we've gotten to the point in 2019 where we probably should just be doing like everybody's registered to vote. We'll do it along with selective service or Social Security. I don't care. And national holiday. Right? Voting days are national holidays, and everyone's registered to vote.
We should have David LaBeouf on here, in part because I haven't won an
David
argument
LaBeouf
with
can
a
come in
political
here
official in the show in a long time.
If he's going to dress as
a
an Ewok.
softie. We should get him on here because he's talking about how he feels like this is a sort of, in some ways, makes it harder for people to vote. But it actually doesn't make it harder for people to vote. It just makes the process of voting have this weird, annoying part of it.
Right.
It doesn't feel like it needs to happen.
Wait, the
where
whole
they're
thing
like,
is,
are you sure?
The whole thing is weird in the first place, too, right? Like, I mean, complete strangers asking you where you live. I mean, it violates all the rules that would, like, the whole stranger danger thing that we're teaching kids from a young age. We're probably getting generationally. Do we? I think we do.
I feel like
I only like strangers at this point.
Now we just have like
bad experiences with people I know well.
I think we have AIs who profile all people. You know, Brendan, there's nothing in the rule book that says you can't wear a hood to school. No, wait, there is. Do we even want? I mean, the school department.
This whole thing is so stupid.
Is changing the dress code, and now they're changing the changes to the dress code.
Yeah.
Basically, this has to do with how long of skirts and shorts you can wear. Can you get a religious exemption to allow yourself to wear a head thing? Sure.
Yeah.
And also, you could wear a hood as long as it doesn't cover your head or face.
I'd like to show all the viewers here, Mike, that I made the fashion decision this year to go to tactical capris. So I think these are a length that you're only getting. Well, that's a good shot.
Get the capri area.
Yeah, so that's the capri area down there, a little bit longer, and I think that would be acceptable by Worcester Public School standards. But I actually had a conversation with one of the school committee members about this when it came up last year, specifically. So in the rock climbing world, one of the things that we talk about, we might have talked about this on the show too, so I'll keep it brief, but is your ape index, right? So that's when you think of the Vitruvian Man model, right?
This is like the difference between the distance between your middle fingers versus your height.
Yeah, and ideally, that actually is a circle, right? It's a really neat thing. That's where
it's theoretically the same. Your distance between the tips of the middle fingers is the same as the distance from your head to your heels.
When everything is kind of like
when
normally
you're in good
extended.
Posture, yes.
But that's rarely the case. That's an ideal, right? Like
sure.
It's very common for people to have extremely short arms relative to the length of their body, and have very long arms. Like I have long arms. My son has ridiculously long arms relative to the length of his body, and that's where this gets weird, right? The idea that like you're having. It seems just young ladies line up before school with their hands extended to measure the length of their...
If you can touch your skin with your finger, then your skirt is too short.
If you're doing that, you're the kind of adult who personally I don't think should be allowed near children because you're way too interested in what they look like. I'll make that bold statement. 2, there's no standards there, right? Like if basic anatomy will tell you that like you're either making it difficult for people who have short arms or easy for people who have long arms, or maybe the other way around, to violate those rules. They're completely arbitrary.
I mean, the perfect is the enemy of the good. You got to have some kind of a...
Do you really?
You got to have some kind of a something. I will say a quote that I say. This is a quote that I say every day, and this is one of the few literary quotes that I do that seems like it, makes a light go on in people's eyes when people are complaining about something not being fair. My dad used to always say life isn't fair, which I never liked, and as an adult I still don't like. I'm sure that I feel like it's problematic for a lot of reasons. But what I tell people now is have you ever read the novel J.R. by William Gaddis? Great novel of the 70s, literary novel. And J.R. starts off with a line where a guy says, you get justice in the next world. In this world you get the law.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's the reality, which is like, like perfect short regulations you get in the next world. In this world, you get whatever short regulations we can kind of throw together in a reasonable amount of time.
Yeah, so, and again, I know this sounds harsh, but I'm going to stick with it because I think it's valid. In a lot of cases, you're talking about really young children here, and if you're the kind of adult who says, well, a young woman can't be allowed to dress that way because it's distracting to boys or whatever, yeah, well, which ones? Because the ones that are around them probably aren't even old enough to notice yet. It seems more that you're being distracted to the adults there who probably should be focused on other things. I just get really creeped out by adults for a number of levels, too. One, because of a complete ignorance of anything involving contemporary fashion, which I think is important to allow young people to dress, even whether dress the way that both their generation and them as an individual feel comfortable. I think that's a normal thing to allow people to do.
Sure.
And every one of these issues, I think, ticks off a box on that front, right? Like hooded sweatshirts. Why? Like, was there a problem with like banks in elementary schools getting robbed that we couldn't allow hooded sweatshirts? Like, no, it was a late 80s, early 90s fear that it was only brown kids who were members of gangs that were wearing hooded sweatshirts, and that's why we got rid of them. It's absurd. I mean, a lot of these regulations actually identify things like colors that are representing gangs. Like,
right.
These are just old people. These are the old people on Nextdoor.com who are calling the police because someone's parked in a car,
right.
Probably reading a map, trying to figure out how to get home, get back to wherever they're from, and you're calling the cops on them because something different scares you. And these are folks that are terrified of the fashion of young people, and they're making arbitrary decisions to tell them how they can and can't dress, and that's silly.
I know these young people, man. They're causing a lot of
problems. I know. Look at this guy wearing a hat inside here. I mean, violating flag code, wearing a hat. Look at you over here, Mike. This
is actually a real Abby Hoffman move, I have to say. Actually, like Abby Hoffman, I mean, I feel like was the guy who mainstreamed doing what would previously be considered bizarrely disrespectful things with the flag, like wearing it as a shirt or a T-shirt or whatever. That's why people hated him wearing a shirt because
Ken Kesey.
Flag as a shirt.
I think Ken Kesey wasn't he before, or was that?
I mean,
before
Uncle Sam.
Uncle
Sam also. I'm just saying, Abby Hoffman did it as far as a real person doing it and making it a cool thing. I just remember there was an episode of Barney Miller from the 70s, I think, where Wojo gets mad at a guy who's patched a hole in his jeans with the American flag patch. And he's just ready to kill that dude. And people are like, Wojo, you can't do it, man. Don't kill a prisoner for this man. It's not worth it, Wojo Howitz. So like that was the sensibility back then. I mean, I feel like the solution to this Just Cut thing anyway is the solution to all of our public school problems, which luckily is a very libertarian solution.
Universal basic income.
No, shut down the public schools. Then the public school rule book, you could throw it out the window because there's no more public schools to have a rule book.
You can't throw it out the window. You got to put it in your bag bin.
Brendan Milliken, happy 4th of July. Happy America.
Great seeing you, Mike. We'll see you after the holiday.
What do we say on 4th of July? God bless America? Happy Independence Day? Today is our Independence Day.
What did I tell you about aiming Roman candles at Grandma? That's usually what we say, at least in my family.
We'll see you next week. Bye, guys.
Have a good one.
All right. We did it.